Conditionals. Whether you recognize it or not, you play with them all the time in Limbus Company, for better or for worse. Since this is such an integral part of the game, it's frankly surprising that I, Escu, that one Limbus guy that gets his tutorial sent to every poor soul who doesn't know what Project Moon / Limbus Company is, but has a friend who really likes it, haven't talked about conditionals in depth. It also just so happens that the 3 Shi IDs, and yes, there were only 3 of them, demonstrate the dynamic between conditionals and payoff extremely well. So, in what is frankly an embarrassingly thinly veiled attempt to get Project Moon to give us some more Shi IDs during the goddamn Poise season, I'll be talking about Shi Dawn, Ishmael, and Heathcliff with a particular focus on their individual payoffs for their relatively unique conditional, and how that affects their viability as IDs. But first of all, what do I mean by a conditional? Most of you probably already know what this means in the context of Limbus, and I use the term a lot, but for those who don't know, a conditional is basically what is required to activate an effect of a skill. The most common conditional is on hit, which requires you to hit the target for your effect to activate, in this case, gaining poise. However, since that is so common, it's hardly ever considered a conditional, since you really should be hitting your opponents most times. The conditional we care about here is the Shi Association Special, the OSHA violation, or in Limbus's terms, being below 50% HP. Conditionals are so diverse that we can pretty much get an idea of what is a hard condition and an easy condition, and while I could list examples all the way down, all you need to know is that being below 50% HP falls on the more annoying side of conditionals. In regular story content, getting below 50% HP from full HP will take at least a few turns, in human fights especially, in which you are sacrificing damage in favor of being hit, and due to the Shi IDs having 2 stagger bars quite high up, you are getting staggered very early on, leading to more downtime. And the ever-present danger of pulling a 5 surgery and just straight up dying. Now, while that sounds bad, and frankly, it kind of is, the below 50% HP conditional becomes a lot better when we consider dungeon content or railway content, where you can transfer your health over. And this is the content I will mostly be referring to while I talk in this video. But as a blanket statement, the payoff for 50% HP conditionals in story content is not worth it, with very few notable exceptions. But now that the stage is set and you understand what a conditional is, let's look at these 3 IDs and assume they have none of their conditions active, then compare them with their stronger yet far less healthy versions. Shi Heathcliff is up first and is certainly the weakest of the trio, which, while canonically accurate, is still upsetting nonetheless, because Heathcliff in general is as based as a British person could possibly be. I mean, look at this guy. He's definitely subscribed to Escu, just like you are. Right? Sadly, despite having undeniably great taste in Limbus YouTubers, his skill 1 and 2 are painfully below average, damage and clashing-wise, both being a single coin with lower than average rolls. When I say that, I mostly refer to the skill 2, which is below the single coin average of 16, but the skill 1 rolling a 10 base really should have been made illegal across the board with uptime 4. Looking on the bright side of things, the skill 3 is where Heathcliff shows his 1 upside when above 50% health, and that is having pretty good damage on this skill 3. A 17 rolling 2 coin skill does not sound too impressive until you consider it is always dealing plus 50% more damage, assuming you are not literally on the boundary of death, in which case this straight up kills you in a pretty funny fashion. But plus 50% more damage on both coins makes its raw damage go from an unimpressive 28 to 42 raw damage. Now, this is still nothing spectacular, but it is certainly good. Still though, the skill 1 and 2 being single coin skills with below average clashing is definitely what holds him back the most and makes him the worst of the 3. But Shi Ishmael is really not too far behind, since she is practically about as middling of a 2-star ID as one could really get when not below 50% health. A 2-coin skill 1 rolling 11, a 2-coin skill 2 rolling a 13, and a 2-coin skill 3 rolling an 18, with only the skill 3 being slightly above curve. She does not even have anything too notable currently about her on-hit effects, so she really is just average. However, being average still puts her above Heathcliff, who only has the advantage in skill 3 damage and skill 2 clashing, but his damage is still behind Shi Ishmael's on the whole. So, very fittingly, the director of Shi Section 5, Don Quixote, is at the top. Though her skill 1 is a 1 coin and at least rolls an 11, and her skill 2 is very solid. A 2-coin skill 2 rolling a 16 unconditionally on a 2-star ID is very notable, due to it being completely unique, and puts her clashing in line with the single coin skill 2s with the same roll, but with far more damage. The funny overbreathe skill is similarly above average in its power, with most single coin skill 3s for 2-star IDs hovering around the 19 to 22 range, but Dawn clears that with a 25 roll. This means that Shi Dawn's clashing is far above average, with damage that falls around the middle of the pack, but it is still enough to make her the best Shi ID with no conditions active. But, while this baseline is important to establish, the Shi IDs are mostly only talked about assuming they are below 50% HP. Except Dawn. And there's a good reason for that. As I mentioned before, 50% HP is an annoying condition to maintain, even in content like Railway and Dungeons, since you have to not use Healing Ego or use it sparingly, since a lot of Healing Ego target the lowest HP allies, which will more often than not be your Shi IDs unless you made a substantial error. So the payoff needs to justify the conditional. And in Dawn's case, her payoff is by far the worst of the Shi IDs. Her only benefit from being below 50% HP is 4 more haste next turn after using her skill 2. Outside of just making her able to have her zoomy times, this guarantees you the +5 skill power on Overbreathe, which brings it to a total of 30 power. Which is good, but absolutely not worth the effort required to get her below 50% HP. Since you are basically sacrificing half your health and the usage of Healing Ego for a 20% increase to your skill 3, which is 1/6 of your entire kit. Now, the good thing is, again, this means Shi Dawn is a better ID overall than Heathcliff or Ishmael, since the payoff for her conditional is just not worth it, meaning you can play her completely normally and not miss out on much at all. But as a Shi ID that is assumedly meant to interact with the low HP mechanic, Dawn certainly deserved more of a benefit from being low on health. But on the other hand, we have Heathcliff, who has conditions present on every single one of his skills, whether those be poise conditions or below 50% HP ones. And oh boy, is he reliant on these to be good, or really, even particularly usable. For the skill 1 and 2, they gain the same benefit of +2 skill power. This means instead of rolling a 10 and a 15, he would roll a 12 and a 17, which makes his clashing go from below average to slightly above average. And while I really do mean slightly, it is a marked improvement. But the main thing is this skill 3, where there is lots to talk about. Firstly, at 10 plus poise count, this gets the same +2 skill power. Now, while this is nice and would help supplement even more damage to this skill, let's think back. Where exactly does Heathcliff gain poise count from? 3 poise count on the skill 1 means that Heathcliff will get this after about, never amount of turns have passed, since he would have to cycle all of his skills multiple times to get this condition on his own, and would be critting and losing poise count every turn, so this is a good example of a conditional that practically does not exist in regular play. Getting back on track, the second line of text reads, at less than 50% HP, attack weight +1. Now, this is what brought Shi Heathcliff into the limelight for a time after Uptide 4's release. +1 attack weight would mean double damage on a skill that already deals a respectable amount of damage. Remember that 42 raw damage from before? We can now comfortably call that 84 raw damage, which is very strong, and I don't want to understate that. However, this conditional increase comes with conditions. +1 attack weight sounds good, and is good for fights where you are getting value out of it. But let's assume Shi Heathcliff is fighting an abnormality with his team. +1 attack weight could hit another part of the abnormality, yes, but 8 to 9 out of 10 times, you are only ever attacking one part of an abnormality. Meaning that if one part is broken and fatal, the other one will likely take only normal damage, or even worse, slightly lowering the effectiveness of this +1 attack weight. This does apply to all fights, but it is most obvious in abnormalities, because you really do only ever stagger one target there. Obviously, more damage is more damage, so I really shouldn't complain, but it is a bit of a gripe I have with attack weight increases in the game as a whole, especially 2 attack weight skills like what Shi Heathcliff has. With his condition active, it's not crazy to say Shi Heathcliff is better than Shi Dawn. I would actually generally agree. However, Shi Heathcliff needs that condition to be active, and to have it be able to actually get value, which is certainly not the case every time. No less, he has a similar problem to Shi Dawn. The main benefits are with that skill 3, of which you only have one of in your skill deck, meaning you only find real good value one time out of every 6 skills. Now, the increase to clashing and damage on the skill 1 and 2 should not be ignored, but it's pretty fair to say the majority of the value is found right here. Again, don't get me wrong, This value is big, especially if you run him in mirror dungeons, and especially if you get him with a skill replacement. It's absolutely worth it to bring him to low HP, since mirror dungeons heavily favor attack weight, since enemies usually only start with one skill slot, which makes it easier to hit 2 of them. However, I don't think I would recommend Shi Heathcliff's conditional for something like Railway or general boss fights, which is a real shame, since if we just expand this concept out a little bit more and gave his skill 2 +1 attack weight as well, we have an ID who, while still not insanely strong, certainly could hold his own niche in attacking multiple enemies at once. Even if the skill 2 is not that good on its own, literal double damage would help a ton, and an ID with 2 skills with 2 attack weight would be really cool and justify that absolutely massive sword he lugs around. Now, while I would not call Heathcliff's condition disappointing, it does pale in comparison to what I think is the most well done and balanced conditional in the game with Shi Ishmael. Her kit comes together completely when she is below 50% HP for various reasons, but we should start with the biggest one by far, and that is Flashing Strike, which, yes, is the same name as Heathcliff's skill 3. The Shi aren't very creative when it comes to names, but this skill reuses both its coins. Once again, using raw damage, we find that this increase is actually more than double due to how Limbus's coin system works. Without the condition active, this deals 22 raw damage, and with it, a frankly ridiculous increase to 60 raw damage, a 38 damage increase. To put into perspective just how good this is, let's compare the 2 Flashing Strikes and mark the differences. First of all, Shi Ishmael's Flashing Strike clashes higher. Yes, that's right, the reused coins are rolled in a clash as well, meaning we are clashing at a 21, which is easily the best clashing skill 2 a 2-star can have. Heathcliff's maximum is 19 by comparison, but realistically that will never go above 17. In terms of raw damage, Heathcliff does win out when we account for the 50% damage conditional, but the most key difference is that Heathcliff's Flashing Strike is a skill 3. For some reason, Project Moon thought it was a good idea to make Shi Ishmael have a 4-coin, 21 rolling skill 2, meaning you can feel the massive value of being at low HP 33% of the time. However, there is still so much more, like the fact that all the damage is focused on a single target, meaning there's no need to worry about making use out of some attack weight, or like how this skill gives 4 poise potency and 8 poise count in combination with Shi Ishmael's passive. Poise count is relevant for both her skill 3 and counter, making them deal more critical damage, so having such easy access to 8 count is a relief considering how many poise IDs usually struggle for count. The last few things to tie Shi Ishmael nicely together is her skill 1 giving even more poise potency, meaning she can maintain poise count relatively well, and her potency gain means she will be critting reliably enough to make the otherwise lackluster poise damage bonus of 20% flat actually feel like it matters. And her skill 3 is a panic button when getting a little too close to dying, which is a really nice safety net that the other 2 severely lack. Needless to say, Shi Ishmael practically becomes a whole new ID when below 50% HP, and is a perfect demonstration on how to make a condition like that worth it, while not making her overpowered due to the difficulty of maintaining the condition still remaining. And ever since launch, we have sadly still not seen an ID that takes a difficult conditional to quite this level of drastic change, which is kind of a real shame. And those are the 3 Shi IDs, who I really do think demonstrate very nicely and concisely the 3 different kinds of payoff. There are more, but at least these 3 are the main ones. Dawn has a negligible payoff, but her base kit is solid enough to not need it, so playing into her conditional is just never worth it. Heathcliff's base kit kinda sucks ass, but his payoff is good and he absolutely wants it to be good, but the difficulty of the condition sometimes holds him back, since his main payoff, in my opinion at least, is just not as reliable. So he's sometimes worth playing into. And then Shi Ishmael is average in her base kit and relies hard on her payoff, but it's well worth investing some turns into, so she is almost always worth it. While conditionals and payoff are really simple concepts, they are something a lot of people take for granted and tend not to think too hard about. And so I wanted to scratch another one of those core Limbus mechanics off of my to-do list. I also wanted to make this video just to praise Shi Ishmael for still having a really good balance between the 2, despite what is generally an innate setback of being a launch ID, and especially since she's the only ID in the game that literally everyone has, meaning she is always an option for new players and veteran players alike due to her uniquely strong skill 2. However, let's be real. If we're talking about the Shi IDs, there's another Shi ID who is at least worth mentioning, and that is Harpooner Heathcliff. Now, I'm not going to fully cover this ID since I do want to make a video on him one day, but I figure I should mention these similarities. While, unlike the actual Shi IDs, he has no one set cutoff where he gets value, his damage just straight up increases for every percentage of health he's missing. He also borrows from the middle IDs a little bit, since he does actively want to be hit, or have others be hit to either activate his counter, or more importantly, get those sweet offense and defense level buffs. He does mention HP percentages in his skill 3 specifically, inflicting more bleed when at lower and lower HP thresholds. So this combination of more damage, more bleed, and more offense/defense level up, alongside an already very solid base kit, makes Harpooner Heathcliff's conditional value mixed. He kind of has a trait taken from each of the Shi IDs. Like Shi Don, his base kit is already good on its own. But like Shi Ishmael, there's a lot of potential that can be had when you invest time into bringing his health low. And like Shi Heathcliff, he's a Heathcliff ID. So while I still think Shi Ishmael is the best conditional in the game for how much it changes the ID once the condition is filled, Harpooner Heathcliff allows flexibility in his playstyle by having his base kit be so strong, while still highly incentivizing his conditional with just a ton of damage, which is also a very valid design philosophy that I also enjoy. And it makes me very excited for the next proper Shi Association ID. But talking so much about this below 50% HP condition did make me wonder, why do the Shi IDs even have this? Now, I know their whole thing in Runa was being exhausted, and it is part of their fighting style, at least as far as I'm aware, to some extent, but above all, the Shi IDs are assassins. And I really hope we see more Shi IDs in the future that forego the Runa stereotype, and instead give us cool benefits when attacking enemies first in a turn, or specifically boosting unopposed attacks. There's a lot of design directions Shi IDs can take, and it is a shame that despite literally getting name-dropped in Kanto 4, we saw no sign of more Shi units. Hell, they don't have a 3-star. And also, as much as people may seem to want a passive or an ID that starts Shi identities at 50% health by default, I think it would take away this trade-off dynamic in some forms of content, and make Shi Ishmael just the best, or at least easily one of the best 2-star IDs with no competition at all. So if they do keep this gimmick, I hope they keep this gimmick as it is, and on the whole, I hope we continue to see more impactful conditionals in the game, and especially ones more along the lines of Shi Ishmael. That's all from me. As always, thank you for watching. This What? Roll for outro DC of 13? I mean, okay. Huh. Rolled a 4.